Hi, everyone. I'm Navya. I'm one of the consultants here at Study Hall College Consulting. And today I wanted to talk to you all about my new blog post, all about how to create a study schedule in STEM classes. So I was a pre-med at UC Berkeley, and with that, I had to take a ton of science classes. I took Introduction to Chemistry, Biology, Physics, Organic Chemistry, Math, and so many other classes. Now, for me in high school, I don't think I studied as much as I probably studied in college. I was the type of student in high school where I paid attention a lot in class. I did my classwork on time. I tried to do my homework as much as possible at school so that I had time for my extracurriculars after school. And when it was exam season time, I spent maybe 3 days maximum before an exam, preparing for the exam, and then I would take the exam. And more often than not, I would do okay. Of course, in AP classes, I needed to work a bit harder. I had to spend a bit more time preparing, taking more notes, making more study guides, that kind of thing. But I really never had a set study schedule, and somehow I was able to get by. It was a combination of the rigor of my courses or in conjunction with having more free time in my senior year, or just being able to better manage my extracurriculars just because it revolved around the class schedule so much. But when I came to college, all of that changed. When you're in college, you have classes all over your schedule. You have classes in the morning, in the afternoon, you have classes some days and not the other days. So it really took me some time to figure out the way that I studied best. So my first semester, I took 13 units, which is the minimum number of units you can take at Berkeley. And my first semester, I took an Introduction to Chemistry course and an Introduction to Math course. Those were my two big STEM classes. And I would say after that, I pretty much always had maximum two technical STEM type classes or two science classes at a time. I personally could not handle more than that. But my trial run was that first semester and really just my first year as a freshman. So when I came in, I had no idea how I wanted to study. I knew that there were so many resources available. I learned about tutoring that was done through the university. I learned about tutoring and review sessions that were done by departments or by the course staff itself. And then I knew that there were office hours. I knew that there were times where you could get together with your peers and study as well. So there were so many resources available, and I really felt super overwhelmed. I didn't know what resource would work well for me. And instead, I thought that I need to use all of them. So within my first semester, I kind of stayed in the same study routine that I did in high school, in the sense of I would go to lecture, I would take notes, I tried to write down every single thing that the professor mentioned, and I didn't really review my notes afterwards. Maybe I would review it before a midterm, but typically I just took my notes in class. I did my classwork, I did my homework, I went to review sessions, I went to different tutoring sessions that I thought would help me, and they did help me. But the problem was that I never really understood the foundation of the material. In high school, I always felt like it was easy to grasp the material in class and be able to apply it in classwork or homework, and that was kind of sufficient for my learning. But in college, I quickly learned that it just doesn't work for me. So I really struggled my first year. I really struggled to keep up with the material. I really struggled in those group sessions, the review sessions or the tutoring sessions, to feel like I was understanding the basics before even considering tackling the bigger problems. So my first semester, I did struggle. I was really unsure about how to study. I remember my first exam did not go as well as I wanted it to. I thought I felt confident about the exam, but when I got my score back, it did not reflect what I thought I had received. So at the end of that semester, I really had to make a change. So the next semester, I tried something a bit different. I tried to go slower with my notes. I tried to listen more in lecture and just write down what seemed most important. But then I was spending so much time in the note taking process that I wasn't spending enough time in the application process. So again, I had some improvement there, but it was still difficult for me. It was difficult for me to catch up. I felt really frustrated that so many of my peers around me seemed to be grasping the material faster, and I just didn't know what to do. So what I chose to do was ask a friend. I asked some senior students that I knew from my high school that went to Berkeley that were taking similar classes that I currently had to take. And one girl that I spoke with, she gave me advice to make a study guide for every single lecture. So after that semester, going into my sophomore year, I went into it with a completely new headspace. And I decided that when I go to lecture, I wanted it to mostly be auditory learning. I wanted to just sit there, be present, listen to whatever examples the professor mentions, try to grasp as much as I can, and take notes as appropriate. So, if the professor mentions a word, a special vocabulary word that isn't already in the slide, I would write that down. Or like an example that they mentioned that wasn't already in the slide, I would write that down. Most professors will upload their lecture slides either before lecture or after lecture. So you always have that as a resource. So figure out how you can make that work to your advantage. For me, it was helpful to read over the slides before the lecture began, or even just have the slides pulled up on an iPad or a tablet, or even just your laptop to have there to reference and kind of follow along with the lecture. But don't worry too much about getting every note down, because I think previously I was so caught up in wanting to write every single detail down that I wasn't actually understanding the details that I was writing. I was just writing them for the sake of writing them. So in that semester, I went to lecture, I sat in my seat, tried to sit in the first few rows because I found that that was less distracting for me. And I tried to focus. I tried to listen to the professor. I tried to engage and ask questions and raise my hand, take notes on very, very few things, or just few things that I thought were important. And then after the lecture, later that week or later that day, I would rewatch the lecture. Most of my classes were course captured. So that means during lecture, the lecture itself will be recorded, either video or audio or both, and then they'll upload it to your class portal later on. So I was able to reference the lectures and just rewatch the lecture, slow it down, sometimes play it on 2x speed or half-time speed, and then make my own very concise and detailed notes from there. And that was really helpful because I could reinforce the information that I had just learned auditorily in lecture and now write it out, which is the way that I learned best. I learned best by writing things out, having things color coded, making study guides, review sheets, that kind of thing. So that process really worked for me. So I'd go to lecture, sit there, listen, take a few notes, later rewatch the lecture, make study guides, make like detailed study guides with like all the important stuff, make mnemonics, that kind of thing. And then I would go to office hours. I would go to review sessions. I would work with my peers on homework and really focus on applying the information. And I think what really is the key is periodically looking over the study guides and the review sheets that you made for previous lectures. It's so easy to forget about what you learned in lecture 1 or 2 when you're on lecture 10, but you're going to need to know all of it for the exam. So I think it was really helpful to, at the end of the week, read over, the 3 study guides or the 3 lectures that you had that week. That way you're like really piecing together information cumulatively rather than trying to, get it all together in the last week before an exam. So eventually with time, I found that that process worked really well for me, a combination of individual work, focusing on understanding the foundations of the material, and then later applying them in a group setting. That altogether is really what helped me do the best in some of my STEM classes. So of course, there will be times where that doesn't work or you need to adapt to different ways of learning, but really you need to figure out what's best for you. My biggest piece of advice is just to listen to yourself. It's so easy to compare yourself to your peers, but try to focus on yourself. Try to really listen to, how do you learn best? Is it a group setting? Is it an individual setting? Or do you need more professor you one-on-one time? So find the resources that work for you. I would recommend that you try everything in your first couple years, your first year, find what works for you and try different techniques. It's difficult to transition from high school to college. Most people that I know did not have the same study routine in college that they did in high school. So be open to, trying different techniques. I would say a really big key in my learning was definitely office hours, being able to go and directly talk to the professor one-on-one, whether that's to review something that they mentioned in lecture or have them go through another example that is supplemental to what they already mentioned in lecture, or maybe they need to give you an extra practice problem, or they need to even just tell you about something in their research that is applicable to what you're learning, and maybe they can give you a new take on what you heard and that will help you understand it better. You never know what will click, so really take advantage of your resources. When you go to office hours, every class is a bit different. Some of them are one-on-one, where you'll be speaking directly with the professor. Other office hours are more group settings, where you'll walk into a classroom with 20 students or so with one professor, and it'll be kind of like question and answer, and the professor will go through questions on the chalkboard. I honestly found those environments to be really helpful. Even if I didn't have a question or I thought I didn't have a question, just going to office hours in the group setting and listening to your peers ask questions is really helpful, because you might not know you're confused about something until you hear that somebody else is also confused about it. So in that similar path, it's easy to feel bogged down by all the details of the material or feel like other people are grasping things faster than you. But I promise you, everyone is probably just as confused as you are. Going to office hours really helps with that, because you can see that your peers are also really confused. So for me, again, combination of figuring out what worked for me individually, what worked for me in lecture, how my note-taking style varied, going to review sessions, and just really reinforcing the same information. It's really a snowball effect. So you want to make sure that you're really getting the foundations before you can build on the snowball. So college has a lot of resources. STEM classes in particular have a lot of resources. So just find what works for you. Really listen to yourself, your mind, your brain, figure out the best way that you learn. It's really helpful to even just talk to yourself or talk through the material with a partner, or even in front of a mirror. You want to find the best path that works for you. And there's no clear-cut answer for everyone. So just try different options, see what sticks, see what helps you improve, and just keep an open mind. Again, STEM classes are notoriously difficult. They're meant to be that way, but if you keep an open mind and you take advantage of the resources around you, you'll be great. So hopefully that was helpful. I think I have a few more tips in my blog, so I would love it if you all got a chance to check that out. And if you read through my blog or something that I said today caught your eye and you want to talk more about it, or just have more questions in general about STEM classes or how to create a study routine, I'd love to chat with any of you all. So definitely check out our website for Study Hall College Consulting, and hopefully I'll be able to chat with one of you all very soon. Thank you.